Podcasting from Singapore and broadcasting all around the world. You're listening to the EdTech Chat Podcast, taking the pulse of educators from all over the globe and bringing what you need every week. Now, over to your host, Craig Kemp.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the EdTech Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Kemp, and I'm thrilled to have your support. Thank you to the hundreds of you that downloaded the very first episode of the EdTech Chat Podcast last week, and for those of you who subscribed and shared. I can't thank you enough. Every subscriber and every share makes it worth my while and drives me to share more and be connected, so please keep at it. I also wanted to shout out to the many people who sent me feedback, congratulations comments, and such positive words. It filled me with joy and a drive to make this bigger and better just for you. I'm refining my workflow and recording processes to ensure that the audio quality improves, and I'm working with the incredibly talented Mark Quinn to improve the final audio quality. Mark is an incredibly talented educator and producer and is a long-time connection of mine online. Mark has been a podcasting pioneer since the mid-2000s through a partnership with WVIZ in Ohio, USA, where he has trained hundreds of educators how to implement and use both video and audio podcasting in their classrooms. He has since moved on to open a podcast production studio that provides editing and mastering services to content creators. I highly recommend his services. He can be contacted at Mark_Quinn on Twitter and markquinn9129@gmail.com. Each week, I like to pose a question to you to think about throughout the episode and beyond. This week, I encourage you to think about your elevator pitch for educational technology. This week's focus is a lot on strategy. If you were to be stuck in an elevator from the ground floor to level 5, say about 30 seconds, how would you explain your EdTech strategy or your EdTech why to a parent, a visitor, a colleague, or a member of the board of directors? If you can't do this, it's a great activity to run with key decision makers in your school. This week, I also had a few questions submitted, and I wanted to discuss one in particular from Jennifer in Australia. She asked, how could schools approach ICT strategy development when schools return after COVID-19 so that we continue to move forward? Thank you for your question, Jennifer. I really love hearing from my professional learning network and sharing my passion for the authentic and purposeful integration of technology for learning. One of the biggest mistakes I see schools make is not including EdTech into a strategic plan, or having a plan but housing it outside of a school-wide strategic plan. Technology is a tool for learning and should be embedded into everything we do, not just in the classroom but in our strategy development as well. As schools in Australia, New Zealand, China, Vietnam, and many other countries all over the world start to get back after a significant amount of time in a remote learning situation, now is an extremely important time to reassess your EdTech strategy plan and ensure it is in line with your strategic vision for the future. Your first step is, of course, to get back and rebuild those relationships with your learners and your community. But now, more than ever, is the perfect opportunity for you to relook at your strategy plan, or, if you don't have one to start, developing one. A great place to start is to put together an EdTech committee and ask your team to give you an elevator pitch of what the EdTech strategy is in your school. Work from here. Use keywords and brainstorm. What does it look like? What needs to happen in order to be better now and into the future? How can you go about doing it? Don't look at policies just yet. That'll come. Just look at learning and the authentic and purposeful impact that technology can have on it. If you need help or support in this journey, don't hesitate to contact me. But most importantly, start with your people. If you want to get better, move forward, and make a difference when it comes to your use of technology in your school, ask your people what they need and make sure you get some early wins. Whether it's access to a tool that saves your teachers time, additional EdTech professional learning, or an opportunity to share best practice in their classrooms via a classroom walkthrough, you have to start now and start strong. Like Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So be prepared to justify everything. If you have questions that you want answered in this segment, please also reach out and I'll do my best to include it in an upcoming episode. Each week, I want to share a tool that has positively impacted the authentic and purposeful use for technology into classrooms and meeting rooms that I have worked in. It is critical for you to know and understand your why for technology integration prior to using any of the tools I share. Remember, strategy first, technology second, always. Think about how this tool might be used in your day-to-day work and how it can add value to learning in an authentic and purposeful way. This week, I want to start by sharing one of my favorite formative assessment tools, Mentimeter. Mentimeter is an interactive presentation software that's web-based and has multiple features for free. Mentimeter is a tool I use daily in my work with schools, and I use it with students in my classroom to get snapshots of learning and understanding. With Mentimeter, you get real-time input with live polls, quizzes, word clouds, Q&As, and much, much more. Whether it's an exit ticket out of your classroom or a question in a staff meeting you want instant and fast feedback to, Mentimeter is a great option for you. To try it out, go to Mentimeter.com. The link is in the description for you to follow up on. Please let me know your thoughts on it after trying too. Every episode, I bring you a short interview with some of my edu heroes, an engaging learning experience with someone who makes a difference in education every day, with a particular focus or angle towards educational technology. This week, I had the pleasure of chatting with someone who many of you know and look up to, George Couros. Let's have a listen. Today, I have the honor of speaking with George Couros, one of my edu heroes. You might know him as @GCouros on Twitter with over 271,000 followers. And yes, he is blue tick authentic. George and I have been connected for a very long time now. And as a member of my PLN, he is a constant source of inspiration. George is a teacher, principal, and learner. He is an innovative teaching, learning, and leadership consultant, as well as a globally sought-after keynote speaker and author. His best-selling book, titled The Innovator's Mindset, has been #1 on my must-read book for educators for many years, and if you haven't seen it, you must. George, it's an incredible pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk education and technology integration?
Absolutely. I really appreciate the kind words, Craig. It's great to connect with you, and it's been amazing to connect with so many educators across the world. So thank you, because I know that you've been sharing my work for years too, and I really appreciate it.
Of course. Why don't you start by describing your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
Yeah, so right now I actually work with organizations all over the world talking about innovation in education and why it matters, and really focusing on really the human aspect of innovation, which I think is too often we associate the word innovation with technology as opposed to really how do we empower our students, how do we empower our staff. So I get to travel and I speak all over the world. We also have a publishing company. And one of the reasons why that's really important to me is because it's a really great opportunity to really give voice to a lot of educators and use my platform to help share their ideas. And I think that's something that I've been really passionate about. But my career, I actually had no idea that I would end up doing what I'm doing today. I trained to become a kindergarten teacher. It's really the only grade I've never taught. I taught grade 1 to 12, then I was a vice principal, then I was a principal, and then I worked in central office for 8 years and created a job in that school division that was really looking at the idea of innovation. How do we move from pockets of innovation to a culture of innovation, and why that matters so much? And now I get to, help organizations. And I think right now my focus is really how do you embrace change and create meaningful learning? The work seems to be more relevant than ever with all the stuff going on with coronavirus and people having change thrust upon them. But I've just been blown away how educators have been just stepping up and really doing meaningful work with their students in spite of all the barriers that are in their way right now. So part of my job is just kind of empower voices and learn from people too. And yeah, I'm blessed to do this every single day.
So what excites you about education today, George?
Well, I think the same thing that's always excited me is just a willingness to really watch educators try different things to really focus on helping every kid that's under their care. And it's been really incredible to watch. And I think one of the things I've noticed is probably in the last 6 or 7 years, I have seen educators really embrace the idea of innovation and really with the focus on ensuring that they're doing what's best for kids in a way that I didn't see probably in the first 15 years of my career. And I think this is my hypothesis on this. I believe that I've seen more change happen in these last few years because we are better connected to one another. I think when we're in our own organizations, our own schools, and we don't actually get to see the incredible things that other teachers do around the world, I think it limited us. But I think educators are so inspired by one another, and watching people connect over networks, it's really accelerated things. And one of the concepts I actually talk about in the Innovator's mindset is this idea of they're called spikes. And so basically what you see around the world are these spikes. So, in North America, if you want to, go into movies or, you're going to go to Hollywood. If you want to go into theater, you go to New York. If you want to go into this, into country music singing, you're going to go to Nashville. And so those are actually what are known as spikes, but there's never really been a spike for education because there's schools everywhere. But the spike that's happening right now is really those spaces where educators are connecting with one another. That is really accelerating things. And I think that's something I've always really been passionate about, is how do we utilize technology to build relationships and learn from one another. And one of the things I always challenge educators and school districts about is they say like, hey, we want a world-class education. And so I always remind them, if you want a world-class education, you have to really look at what the rest of the world is doing then. You can't just base it on, your own context. And it's important we learn from each other in our own communities, but I've just seen the acceleration of education in a way in the last 5 years because of that connection we have with one another.
Yeah, it's exciting work I think you do. You get to see education in action all over the world, and you have that real ability to be able to compare and contrast education systems and support districts and organizations in being able to adapt and change their strategies for learning as well. What about in relation to educational technology now? What sort of advice would you give the listeners here today on how to use educational technology the best way?
Well, it's funny because I don't know how often people talk about educational technology right now because it's so embedded in the work that we do. And it's just kind of a thing, right? And if you look at when iPhones first came out, it was such a big deal, and now everyone has them and you don't really think twice about it. It's very easy to use and connected. I think for me, when we talk about educational technology, the focus often is on the wrong thing, is the latest and greatest thing. And that can actually hurt education because as we are always trying to do the new thing, it doesn't allow us to get really good at the last thing. So when I talk about innovation, my focus isn't on embracing all the new things that are out there, because you couldn't actually give 100 things every single day. But it's how we actually look at innovation and we use technology to focus on depth. So one of the things I always suggest is, when you're looking at tools that you're utilizing, are these things that you're going to be able to provide professional development for the next 3 years? You're going to actually have that it's not just in one classroom, but it's something that you're going to build through all spaces. And how does this actually help students? How does this actually focus on what's best for kids? And I think that, to me, when we look at educational technology, it's really important to focus, when we talk about innovation, on depth as opposed to surface level, because teachers are frustrated with this too, is that someone goes to a conference, they see something new and shiny, and then they try to implement it. And then just when teachers start figuring this stuff out, then all of a sudden the new thing comes out. We need time to actually really go deep with the learning. We can't just continuously, change where our focus is, because it might look good on the outside, but really, if it's shallow, it's not beneficial to anybody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of the work I do with schools and developing strategy around their use of educational technology, it really stems from the why. And I think Simon Sinek says it really well when he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think more people need to really focus down on that why and the how part, rather than jumping straight to that what, that new thing in the market that you think is going to make a big difference in your day-to-day teaching. And I love your advice there. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about your professional learning network. You're super well connected. We've been connected on Twitter for some time now, but I know you're connected on other social medias as well. Tell us a little bit about your professional learning networks, where do you engage and who should we be connecting with?
Yeah, so I've always focused on like connecting with people around topics, and one of the things that I'm always asked is who would you follow? And there's tons of people that have influenced me. My own brother, Dr. Krause, got me using social media probably 11, 12 years ago for the purpose of connecting and growing as a principal at the time. But what I always suggest to people is don't necessarily look for a specific person, but look for like a hashtag. So if you're a math teacher, I could suggest, Dan Meyer, who is an incredible math teacher, and that's one person. But I would actually think it'd be better off if you connected to the hashtag math chat, because you're going to see math educators from all around the world using that. And I think the other one for math is MT Boss. So really, that to me, because if I connect you with 100 kindergarten teachers, that doesn't mean they're going to be talking about kindergarten teachers or kindergarten teaching strategies. But if I get you to connect through the hashtag KinderChat, you're going to actually see stuff that is totally relevant to kindergarten teaching every single day. And that's one of the things that I've really been focused on. But I use other elements, like I use YouTube to share my podcasts, and, obviously through Apple Podcasts and things like that. Instagram I use for some professional learning, some fun. Facebook I use to connect with my friends. But I think for me, the best advice that I give people is you don't need to do everything. Just find one or two things that are really helpful. And there's things that I have been suggested are like the absolute greatest network ever, like Voxer. And people absolutely love it. And it works for them. I have no interest in using it. And it's not because I don't think it's a good tool. I don't think it's great for connecting with other educators. It's just I've connected in so many places that it's impossible to be in all spaces and actually be effective. So I think if you're, listening to this and you're like, well, I want to try Twitter, that's great. But if you have a really robust network that you're connecting with on Instagram or Facebook, that to me is really the more important thing, is where are you connecting with people that are, teaching or doing the same work that you're doing, so you can learn from them, not you have to be on Twitter or you have to be on LinkedIn. Just find those one or two spaces. I think that for me has been the best advice, because I know when I connect in too many spaces, I feel overwhelmed and anxious, and it's harder to find really good stuff. But when you really, as I said earlier, focus on, a couple things and you focus on doing them, in depth, then it really helps you grow as an educator and as a person.
Yeah. And I think the whole idea of being connected is the most important here. So wherever you feel most comfortable is the place that you should go to. And I'm the same as you, George. I'm an advocate for Twitter, and that's where I've sort of connected and engaged and learned so much over the years. But in saying that, I've diversified a little bit more recently in investigating the use of tools like Instagram as well to connect and engage. So it's been a bit of a challenge put in my tool belt as well, something that's pushed my boundaries a little bit, made me feel a little bit out of comfort zone as well. And that's been really exciting to be involved in. What about educational technology tools? I know we've said today that, we both agree that it shouldn't be a focus on the tool, it should be a focus on the learning. But what is a tool that you're using right now that's helping you in your day-to-day work, something that you think everyone else should be using as well?
Yeah, and probably the tool actually you know me for, which is kind of weird because I don't even know if you know that, is I've been using WordPress for my own portfolio for 10 plus years, and I've actually been doing quite a bit of work with that. And I see a lot of organizations talking, well, we do portfolios with this or this or this. And I actually think WordPress is really, really powerful. And for those who don't know, WordPress is a software. It's not necessarily a site. So EduBlogs, for example, is run on WordPress. Kidblog.org is run on WordPress. And the reason why I love it so much is because I've been working on portfolios for the last 10 years. The sole focus of actually starting a portfolio on WordPress was to understand how students could actually use a portfolio for their own learning. And I didn't think we could effectively do that if we as educators hadn't actually done the learning ourselves. So I went and did some investigation, kind of thought about like, what do we actually want from a portfolio? And then when I, looked at the, as you said earlier, Craig, why we wanted to do it, we really focused on, okay, well, what is the best way? So we actually went with WordPress because not only is it really beneficial and powerful in the way you can utilize it, because WordPress is a blogging platform, but it wasn't necessarily meant to be a portfolio site. But the way we leverage that technology, and that's kind of the innovation, is that it was made to do something else. And then we actually repurposed it to do something that was meaningful for us. It is really amazing the depth that we can do. And when I started it to understand it for the benefit of students, I actually saw a real power in my own learning. And I saw doors open for me that I actually didn't even know existed. And because I have that understanding, my focus is how do we actually ensure that students have that same opportunity for their own learning, but we also help them open doors. Because a lot of the technology that we use is education focused, and then kids use it from kindergarten, grade 12, and then they go out and then they use real tools that we never actually promoted. Whereas WordPress, I think, is like 35 to 40% of actual websites in the world. And so why are we not using tools that kids can actually not only develop in school, but actually continue on? And so we actually created a space where kids would start at a kindergarten and go all the way through grade 12. And then when they were done in grade 12, they would actually take all the content they made on their WordPress site, and then they'd open their own. So you could actually see their development from all those years. And when I first actually brought it up, it was interesting because I got challenged on it that no technology will last that long. And that was 10 years ago, and I'm still right. And I don't see any end to that. But that's really, for me, there's nothing that I've done that has helped me grow as a professional more than actually creating a portfolio on that WordPress site. It's by far the most meaningful thing I've done for my own professional growth.
Yeah, and I think as a teacher, that learning process is super important to all of us, more so than just about any other profession in the world. So hearing your journey on learning and growing through the use of WordPress is kind of inspirational for me, and I'm sure some of our listeners as well, to sort of continue on with that learning process. On that note, what's a book or resource that you've been reading lately, or you've been invested in, or just one of your all-time favorites? And tell us a little bit about why we should be exploring it.
Well, I think one of my favorite books ever is Dan Pink's Drive, and I know a lot of people have read it, but it really helped me think different about how we motivate not only students, but ourselves. And what's interesting right now is you're seeing that educators don't actually have the tool of motivating kids with grades. That when you're, and well, I should say at least in North America. So, many kids, we teach them, like, hey, if you do this, you get that. We want you to do really well so you can get this, incredible mark to go into college, get prepared for this test. And now that standardized tests have actually been removed, it's really making us really think, like, what is the purpose of this learning? Why should it matter to a kid? Because if you can't use argument, well, it's important for the test, but there's no test, then you really have to think about why it's powerful. And I think when I read Dan Pink's book, we actually started, because he talks about motivation. And he talks about like how the carrots and sticks don't actually work for like really in-depth, innovative ideas. And it actually led, when I read it, it led to us removing awards from our schools, which I think even to this day is seen as something that's kind of crazy to actually do. But based on the research and what has been shown is that not only are, awards to like individuals in school is actually detrimental to the kids who lose them. They're actually detrimental to the kids who win them, because what kids start to focus on is the grade as opposed to the learning. So they'll see what your boxes are. They'll make sure they get them all checked so they can do this, but it doesn't make them think, different. It actually makes them think the same in a system so they can get that mark. And so when I actually talked about that with parents, they were actually understanding of that. And they're like, yeah, this doesn't seem to make sense. And if you even think about one of the concepts that we talk about in education all the time, we talk about the importance of collaboration, the ability to like work with one another. But then many schools award individual effort. They don't actually recognize that collaboration in any meaningful way. And so really we say one thing, but then we tend to focus on something else. And that was, for me, was a book that really changed a lot of how I thought about grades, about awards, and really thinking about my own purpose in the work that I do. And one of the things that I always say to people is like, my goal is not to get every kid to college. My goal is to help kids find a pathway to success that is meaningful to them. And that can mean college. We don't want to exclude college or say that it's not worthy, but it just means that we have to help kids figure out what their purpose is, what success looks like to them, because those things are very individual. And I think when I read books like, Dan Pink's Drive, that really kind of helped me understand that in a different way and really shifted a lot of my thinking, because I was all about what kind of school doesn't give awards. Like that seems, like a very, every kid wins an award type school. And it seemed really fluffy to me at first, but then as I started to explore it, it really shifted my thinking.
Sounds like a great experience as well. I think for me, listening to you talk about Dan Pink's book and everything else, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you find time in every day to do what you do, because not only that, you are a best-selling author of books, in a book in particular, The Innovator's Mindset, that's probably one of the best known books in education. Everywhere I go, people talk about it, and that's globally. I mean, I'm here in Singapore and I get to work with schools and organizations all over the world. Tell us a little bit about your books and what inspired you to write.
Well, Craig, first of all, thank you. Like, it's a real honor. And when I write the books, and I'll be honest with you, I have a really hard time reading education books, because I find they're to be honest, they're very tough reads. I understand there's a lot of research and things like that, but it's really hard to get people to embrace ideas unless the content sticks with you. And so I wanted to write something that was, shared idea. And, it's not like I don't have research that backs up a lot of the stuff that I'm saying, obviously, but some of the research is what we do every day in education was from my background of the work that I was doing in my school division. And I think educators, do research every single day. They connect with kids, they see what works with kids or not. And so I wanted to take some of the ideas that I shared and some of the things that I learned through my journey, and then connect them to, stories of educators and researchers all over the world, but do it in a really compelling way. And I think one of the reasons why the book has connected is because I share stories. And I think that's what great teachers do all the time, is they try to find ways that ideas will stick with people. And the content is important, but the delivery is just as significant through that process. So really the book is kind of my work, what I've seen has worked with organizations, seen what is beneficial. And something that's really important to me is that this is not just my learning. This is learning that I've collected and curated from other people around the world. And a very good friend of mine, his name is Chris Kennedy. He's a superintendent in West Vancouver. And he gave a really interesting review on it. He said, one of the things that George does really well in this book is he takes all the incredible ideas that educators speak about all over the world, and he puts them into one book where everything is there in that space. And obviously, there's tons of other books that share ideas that are very different from mine on different topics. But really on the focus of innovation, I wanted it to kind of share my experience, some of the philosophies I had, but really highlight educators that are already doing this work and doing really incredible things. So it's not just from my perspective, it's, getting to share stories. And I think that's what really resonated with people, is the stories from educators all over the world that are shared in my writing.
Yeah, and it's been a book that's been a game changer for me, as I've already said, George. And I think if people listening today have not read it, they definitely need to jump on board and find it and get stuck into it and get connected with you. Tell us a little bit about what the best way is for the listeners to follow and connect with you.
Yeah, for me, the best space to go is georgecouros.com. You can basically, if you go there, you can find me everywhere else. And that actually, weirdly enough, as we talked about earlier, that what is my portfolio and is actually connected to the Alberta teaching quality or principal quality standards, which, that's how I base my learning in that portfolio process. But you can obviously find me on Twitter or Instagram at GCOUROS. So G Couros. Yeah, and it's great. And I really try my best to connect with as many people as possible. I don't always keep up. I have a young family, so as every educator, we try our best. But I really look for people that, push my thinking, but also are there to elevate one another. And I think that to me is what has helped me grow, is really finding those people that elevate you. And it's amazing that they're all over the world. And, people like yourself, Craig, in Singapore on the other side of the world, we're talking on 2 different days right now. It's been incredible. I still am blown away. There will never be a time I'm not blown away the access we have to one another right now. It's truly incredible.
George, I can't thank you enough for chatting today. You've given us so many nuggets of wisdom and ideas that I know that the people listening today are going to take away and grow and learn from. And I'm going to go straight away from here now, and I'm going to jump on your website and do a lot more exploring and investigating, because you've really given me a bit of interest there to keep going. So thank you for your time. It's an incredible pleasure, and definitely we'll talk again soon.
Hey, thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me. And I hope to connect with everyone listening.
Next week, join me for episode 3 of the EdTech Chat Podcast, when I'm joined by award-winning principal, author, and keynote speaker from the USA with over 150,000 followers on Twitter, Eric Sheninger. Every week, I bring you prizes and giveaways as a thank you for tuning in, listening, and hopefully subscribing to the EdTech Chat Podcast. Last week, Kath Murdoch shared her expertise around inquiry-based learning, and we gave away 3 sets of her Art of Inquiry cards. Thank you to the many people that entered the competition. The correct answer, of course, was to do with her book, The Power of Inquiry. The 3 winners have already been contacted directly by me, and the winners are Nigel Furman, Fiona Morrison, and Craig Hansen. Congratulations to the winners. This week, George Couros is giving away audio copies of his latest book, Innovate Inside the Box, which is the follow-up to his best-selling and globally recognized book, The Innovator's Mindset. This is a highly sought-after text and a prize that every educator wants to get in their hands. To win a copy of George's audiobook, Innovate Inside the Box, you need to go to bit.ly/edtechwin and answer this question. What was the name of George's best-selling book? The link is in the description. Competition closes on Wednesday the 20th of May, and the winner will be contacted directly by me and announced on next week's episode. Good luck. If you enjoyed today's episode, please smash that subscribe button and share it with your colleagues, friends, and families. I appreciate your support. Please share your favorite part of today's episode by tagging me on any of my social media platforms. And please don't hesitate to ask me questions that I can answer in an upcoming episode. Remember, you have the chance to win as well. Check out the links in the description for more, and I'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the EdTech Chat Podcast, creating a community for educators to learn, share, and grow. If you liked today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and be in the drawing to win prizes every week. If you know others that would enjoy the show, please hit that share button and brighten their day. Join us again next week for your weekly EdTech Hit with @MrKempNZ. We'll see you again soon.